What's up, faceting friends? This is Justin K. Prim, and today I wanted to ask a question that I've been thinking about for a long time, which is how do we properly maintain our faceting machine handpiece? So in order to help me figure this out, we're going to be talking to Sandun from the Sterling Gems and Lapidary company, who's going to tell us exactly how they think we should be maintaining our faceting machine. So when talking about faceting machine maintenance, there's two things that we need to think about: the handpiece itself and the base. So I wanted to understand what are some of the things that we should be thinking about when we're using these types of machines every day, every week, every month, every year, whatever. How do we take care of them? How do we keep them running well? How do we make sure that they last a long time? So I'm going to be showing you, as we talk to Sandun, some of the techniques that he recommends and some of the techniques that we've been using to keep our machines running smoothly, cleanly, safely at the IGT school here in Bangkok. So just to show you some of the stuff that's on the desk before we get into the call with Sandun, I've got a brand new toothbrush, probably cheaper the better because it's gonna get dirty. I've got some paper towels, I've got some water, I've got some alcohol, and down here I've got some machine grease. So let's talk about hand pieces first, because it's likely that the handpiece is going to be the thing that's getting the dirtiest, because it's the thing holding the stone and it's kind of right in the splashing action of the machine. So there's a couple different things that we want to think about on the handpiece. For me, probably the most obvious thing that gets dirty is the index gear. But besides the index gear, we've got a lot of little parts back here that, you know, over time and use get covered in grit and dirt and whatever else is floating around in the air as you're cutting. Other things that might need maintained and cleaned is the leather on the thing. As you can see, mine is popping up after a couple of years of use, so we might want to figure out a way to make sure that that stays down. Maybe we need to oil the wood, maybe we need to, you know, use grease in different parts of these things. So let's go over to our conversation with Sandun and see what he has to say about maintaining the handpiece.
So we have doing this gem manufacturing since in 1979. My father, he's a cutter since in 1976, 1977. And then he began to manufacture machines in Sri Lanka in 1979 for our sapphire cutting. If you look at the cutting industry, the experts in Sri Lanka who use the machine, in Ratnapura, in Beruwala, in Galle, they do like big stones, big sapphires in the good machine. Me and my father do new researches in gem faceting, gem cutting. My father does like a hobby, I do for production. We are the gem cutters who made the machine. That's why we make like kind of new things for doping and stuff. We're going forward. If you do calibrating by using your faceter, you should clean every day if you do calibrating. If you want to make the girdle by putting to a 90, when you take this handpiece, our 90 is here, like this. So the water might go inside. Sometimes I do use a rubber sheet put into the tank. So when you do calibrating, so it won't hit on the splash guard. So this would be a good idea to calibrate like this or like that.
Stuff all over the index gear. So what do you think? Like a toothbrush, a dry toothbrush?
That toothbrush, it's a good idea because those stain are a bit hard, no? Maybe half an inch of this paintbrush would be good. Little bit of maybe kerosene oil. Don't put too much kerosene oil because it will go inside and it will stay like inside the chuck and it will dry your grease. If you put more kerosene oil inside the tube, just from the outside.
So the toothbrush, very useful for cleaning small, tiny parts. So as he was saying, the toothbrush can be really handy for cleaning off your index gear. We can see that with the different hand pieces that I've got sitting here, most of these are from the school and a couple of these are from my personal station. We've got one here that's brand new. If you saw my latest new gear day video, this one has never been used before. So this is kind of like our model today for what the index gear should look like, what the rest of it should look like, because it's not that hard to keep the machine as clean as it came. So between cleaning with the toothbrush, you can either just simply dust it off. you can use water, keeping it out of the inside of the chuck, or you can use the alcohol spray. Now the alcohol spray is great because it's going to evaporate quickly. It doesn't stay on anything. So unlike water where, you know, if you use too much, you might have to dry it off and, you know, avoid getting it inside. The alcohol is going to dissolve quickly. Now one thing to keep in mind when you are cleaning around the index gear, it's good to just keep the DOP inside while you're cleaning. Then you don't have any chance of getting alcohol, water, or whatever, or grit down inside of the chuck. You definitely don't want grit going down here. That's gonna gunk up the works. It's gonna prevent the chuck from closing potentially. It's also just gonna start eroding the chuck because you've got diamond powder or maybe corundum powder inside of there. You know, it's basically just like long-term sandpaper inside of the chuck. So we'd like to not keep stuff in there. So I always keep the DOP in there while I'm cleaning. So then if I spray it, it's not really that big of a deal because it's not really going down into the hole where the DOP goes in. So you can just clean it off. And as Sandun was saying, after you're preforming, you know, after you're doing your calibrating step, which is really the step that's getting a large amount of power onto your handpiece, that's usually, I like to do it right away. Like before I go into my cutting stage, I've got a toothbrush next to my machine, just clean it off a little bit, clean off the teeth, because you definitely don't want grit in the teeth either, because that's gonna reduce the life of your index gear. And then you can get behind here and just get all the gunk out and try to get it as clean as you can. You can give it a wipe off, you can dry everything off.
It means just don't put inside the chuck, and you can remove the chuck from the back nut, and twice a month after you have done a good cutting, you can take this out and just see whether it's dried or you have any. It's better to have some grease every time. Right. Machine grease, yeah. Some grease may corrode. If you take red ones, those are for like a hub grease inside the vehicles, and don't put inside. It will get more corrode. It should be kind of brown, yellowish. Yes, and make sure not to put too much grease inside. Otherwise, the stick will get slippery. And we don't put too much oil also. The DOP stick will get slippery.
As he was saying, once a month, you might want to fully take out the chuck by removing this screw here in the back. So you take that off, and now we've got. So if we compare the clean one that's never been used to my handpiece that's a couple years old, we can see maybe how different it should look. So here we can see the brand new one. It's clean, it's covered in grease, it's not black. So that's the look that it should have once you finish cleaning. You should clean it off. As he was saying, you can use sandpaper to get inside of the small areas where the quill can actually close. And then if you have the grease, you can actually grease this up. And now what he was saying, multi-purpose grease. So he was saying don't use the red grease. This is the red grease. This is what we don't want to use. You want the yellowish, brownish, multi-purpose grease. And you can see when we pull this out, you can see what it looks like. It's on here. Now, compared to my old one, it looks dirty, it looks dry, it looks like it could use some more grease. If you compare these two, big difference. And then to put it back on, it only goes in one way. Slide it in. You might take this opportunity to clean the back of your screw, because mine's full of junk. And just clean off the sediment that has gotten inside of there over the years. Close it off, dry it off, and put it all back together.
If you think it won't get locked, it won't work properly, you can clean these small fine cuts, 1, 2, and 3. Get a paper, 600 watts and black color paper, put inside and just clean.
So we've cleaned off our index gear. We've cleaned out the quill and re-greased it. We've gone over the handpiece with a toothbrush and maybe alcohol. And maybe if you needed to, you can use a little bit of shoe glue, basically, in order to fix the leather back down.
Some people use glue to shoe glue.
Just around, like just on the edges and stuff, like
Yes.
just to hold it all down. Okay.
Yeah. This painting, it will erase your paint if you add too much. Slightly inside.
So once your handpiece is back to clean, normal, ready to go condition, then we can move on to looking at the base and seeing what do we need to do to maintain the cleanliness and the functionality of the base of the machine.
Maybe if you start working on Monday, maybe like Friday or Sunday, that would be good to clean. So if you're in production, after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that's okay. So otherwise, it's getting every time it's getting dusty. Yeah. The important thing is it should not contaminate any like sand. You know the axle when the lap it's putting on the weight. So those small tiny sand might contaminate in between that. Before we have to clean the lap, the bottom side, and the axle. This kind of cloth, I kind of polishing. Yeah, wipe it off. At the same time, you should keep your polishing cloth, polishing laps away from the machine because the dust is going out everywhere. And when you clean, you have to use a water bottle, not a cup of, because then you can point right areas. Some people might do like throw into the axle. Some people, so it's better to use a pointed nozzle kind of thing. Maybe most important, some people don't drain. They keep the water inside. It's not a good thing. You got that drain, it's draining to the bucket. That's fine. Some people, they don't do that. And like once a week, they do get a kind of brush, a paint brush thing, and they just clean it.
So as Sandun was saying, he definitely recommends to use a water tube, a PVC tube that plugs into the bottom of the base and goes into a water tank. That's allowing the water to just go out all the time. As he mentioned, some people don't use that, they just keep it locked and the water starts to fill up, and then maybe once a day they empty it out and they clean it out with a sponge. But sometimes this can be bad because if the water goes up over the bolts that are holding the spindle in place, that can actually sometimes maybe leak in there. And as he was saying, it's not good for the bearings, it's not good for the spindle. Better just to keep everything as dry as possible and not let a swimming pool fill up inside of your faceting machine. So if you can get a plastic bottle and a PVC tube, or better yet, we include them in our tools and accessory package, which maybe you can see in a little link up here, which has all the accessories you need if you're using a handpiece machine like this. So attach your PVC tube, put it into your water tank, and don't worry about it. Then you just have to worry about regular cleaning. And you can use a normal kitchen sponge and just clean the inside of the base, you know, the splash area, the splash guard, you can wash that off. Keep it clean, maybe every day or maybe every week if you're not cutting too much. And as he was telling us, a spray bottle is nice because it's directional. So instead of just dumping a bunch of water in there to clean it off, maybe you spray it off with a spray bottle. Again, so you're not spraying the central housing where the bearings are. Rather just keep that stuff clean. Clean around the edge, spray it, wipe it down, dry it, whatever, it's good.
I have seen some people, they do drag the faceter sometimes. Normally we have and up, down, up. That's it, okay? Some people drag it and they do cut the glass also. Most of the thing, some people use too much water. We have to use correct drop. Then the water, it goes to on the lap also. The glass table, then it's starting to catch all the dirt.
Another thing that I've found a lot is when I'm in my preforming step and I have to take the splash guard off, you know, I'm cutting my index gear. Not only is a ton of crud coming at my handpiece here, it's also coming at the handpiece plate. And this is usually when I find that I'm getting some abrasive powder onto the glass plate. So then later on when I'm moving my handpiece to polish or whatever, I'm starting to actually rub the diamond powder, or maybe it's just stone dust, but it's rubbing into the glass, and you can see that I have a wear pattern on my glass, which is not good. So usually I just try and wipe the glass off all the time. As soon as I see any contaminant on there, whether it's diamond powder or stone dust or whatever, give it a little spray with the alcohol, wipe it off with a paper towel, and then you know that you're not rubbing diamond powder into the glass, which will eventually break the glass. So whether you're using a speed controller machine or the old style, just 2-gear speed machine, both types of machine have a belt underneath that's connecting the motor to the spindle. So when you first buy the machine, the belt is thick, it's strong, it's a tough belt. When I talked to Sandun to see, is there any maintenance to do with the belt? He said, no, not really. Just be aware that over time, it could stretch out because it's getting hot, it's getting used. Just like belts in cars, eventually they just stretch out or break.
It depends how you work, like everyday working, it depends. And after 7 years, it will get loose because we are working every time. Okay. So you have to tighten the motor bracket a little bit. Maybe after 10 years, some people, maybe after 12, some people come, it's very thin. They do adjust the motor and they are using.
So he said, for the rare times when people actually come in and need a new belt, maybe 7, 10, 12 years it might take for that belt to actually start to stretch out. And you'll see that the lap will start to slip if the belt gets too loose. And you can actually unscrew the bottom of the machine and spread it out a little bit so that the distance between the motor spindle and the platen spindle is slightly further away, and you could actually get a little bit more life out of the belt. But for me, probably once I see the belt start stretching, I would just put a new one on, because why not? If you're only buying one every 10 years and they're 20 or 30 bucks.
If some laps, if you put forcefully into the axle, some people tap, it's not good one. Then the bearing seats will get adjusted because of the tapping. 2 bearings are inside the housing. So if you tap, the movements of the bearing, it will change. And don't put too much weight laps on the axle also.
So since we're talking about maintenance and longevity of the machine, I thought while I had Sandun on the phone, it might be interesting to talk to him about what are some of the things that you need to do when you first pull the machine out of the box. Brand new machine, it just arrived in the mail on your doorstep, you open that box up, you pull out all the parts, then what happens?
Yes, then after that lift adjuster, the glass, you have to move on to the water cup. You have to place that one and check all the wirings. That's good. So the American standard, it's a bit different. Yeah, they have to change the plug. You have to put those 3 wires, earth and neutral, and the other one. If it's good to use the correct plug without the adapter. Some people, they won't plug it correctly and it will get short.
So we need to put everything together. The water tank holder, the arm that the handpiece sits on, everything has to be put together, tightened, screwed in. But then, of course, the first step, once everything's well put together, balancing the handpiece. So there's been a lot of talk on the forums lately about what's the best way to balance the handpiece. Should you do it while cutting? Should you do it with a feeler gauge? Should you do it with a micrometer leveling thing? And many people have different ideas about doing it. So I wanted to ask the manufacturer, what do you guys recommend? How do you guys do it? And so here's what he showed me.
First you have to do the 90, you have to put 90 and then press from the head and adjust your 2 legs from the back. And make sure when you do that, you should use less water. Then you can know the exact place where the stone touch. If you put too much water, it's hard to see. Dry a little bit the cutting lap and just put and see where it touches on the table. You should use the one area. So when you do this, some people here, can you hear? So they are fine. That space is enough to make another facet, to make your row like this. So that's why we have to use right on middle part. So some people mixed up with this one also. You have to use the middle part of the lap and then you should continue. I do that with the square shape also. I do change only this one. Closer to me, this leg.
So if in my new gear day video, he included this new, it's like an extremely huge dop, flat dop. And basically the point of that is to help us balance the handpiece. So I think that this technique will probably be good accompanied with my other technique that I have a video for up here that is basically cutting a square with a pyramid on top and using the lines of that shape to figure out if it's perfectly balanced. Now that's not that hard to do, but if your handpiece is extremely out of balance, it's good to get it really, really close first. And so what we can do with this big flat dop is basically use it to flatten the head of the handpiece against the lap and then turn the feet in the back so that we can make sure that the feet are flat against the plate while the head is completely flat against the lap. So I thought that was interesting because it's quite similar to what some other people have been doing on the forums with other parts that they're finding and putting into the faceting machine. So now it looks like Sterling has kind of made that part of the whole kit and included one of those dops with the new machines that they have coming out. So a couple of the tips that he said were, don't use too much water when you're balancing the handpiece because it's preventing us maybe from seeing or cutting perfectly flat, because if you have any hydroplaning on the lap while you're cutting, that might change the precise balance. He was also mentioning that using a topper lap on top of a master lap might not be the best way, because of course when we're balancing the handpiece and we're trying to get it perfectly balanced so that when we cut a square, we cut an emerald cut or whatever, it's going to be perfectly symmetrical all the way around. Now, if the handpiece is crooked, it's not possible to make a symmetrical shape. It won't come together in the end. There's going to be something wrong, either mismatched on the girdle or the table's going to be crooked. So making sure that this is perfect is important, and so we'd like to take out any variables that could be influencing us. And so as he was saying, sometimes that tiny gap or the play between the topper lap and the master lap could be enough to change our perception of the flatness of the facet or the angle of the facet or whatever. So it might be a good idea when you're balancing your handpiece, use a centered lap, use a plated lap, but maybe not a topper lap if you're having some troubles. I've definitely balanced my handpieces with topper laps with no problem, but if you're having a trouble with getting it perfectly balanced, this might be another variable to try and remove, because of course the least amount of variables that are influencing the balancing is better for us.
I think they should know the correct method, how to use the faceter. That's the thing. When you start a faceter, here it's not perpendicular to this side. Yeah, now it's getting, there you go. Yes, right on. So then it's good to start from this area also. Train your eyes to catch the perpendicular here to here, okay? And then put 0 on this one. Then it's easy to move forward. Yeah, it's about the technique, and it will take a little bit of time. It will take, in Germany, it's some people learn for 3 years. In Ida Augustin to be a good faceter. And with his experience and stuff, then he can move forward in future, to the future.
So there we have it, a little bit of thought, conversation, and guidance about how to keep your machine clean, from cleaning the handpiece, keeping it in brand new condition, cleaning the base, keeping everything balanced, keeping everything calibrated, keeping an eye on your machine in general to just notice if anything changes. Does your lap start slipping because the belt has stretched out? Are you getting a strange girdle because your handpiece has come out of balance? Are you having trouble getting your index gear set because you have a bunch of crud inside of the teeth? Are you rounding the edges of your index gear because you're not opening it enough when you're spinning it around? All of these things are important, not necessarily on the day-to-day, but when we think about the life of our machine over our whole cutting journey, we would like the machine to last as long as we do. So keeping it clean, keeping it maintained, just like a car, you have to re-oil it, you have to put in the gas, take it to the car wash every once in a while, keep it running well. So this is Justin K. Prim for the Gem Cutters Craft. You guys keep on cutting, keep the machines clean, and I'll check you next time. See you later.